My son banned me from his wedding. Then he mailed me a bill for $80,000 and told me to be grateful. I was sitting alone at my kitchen table in my small Lexington home when the envelope arrived. Thick, cream-colored. My son Kevin's handwriting on the front, neat and confident, like everything else he did these days. For a brief moment, I thought it was the wedding invitation. After months of silence, I allowed myself that small hope. Foolish, maybe, but hope has a way of surviving longer than dignity. I opened it carefully. No invitation. Instead, a stack of itemized invoices slid out and spread across the table like evidence in a trial. Venue rental, luxury catering, imported seafood, a honeymoon suite in Hawaii with private beach access. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Dad, after the problems you've caused the family, be grateful. I'm letting you contribute. Send the check soon. Kevin. $80,000. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to be sure my own son had really written those words. Banned me from his wedding, but still expected my money. Still felt entitled to it. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. What I felt wasn't anger. It was something colder, clearer. On the table next to the bills sat an old photograph of Kevin at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a little league bat almost too big for him. His hand was wrapped around mine. Back then, he thought I was the strongest man in the world. Back then, I was just his dad. Somewhere along the way, I became his wallet. After my wife, Elena, died of cancer, I raised Kevin alone. I worked overtime. I skipped vacations. I lived modestly so he could live better. I never complained. That was my job. That was my promise. But now, according to my son, I was an embarrassment, a liability, a failure, and still useful enough to fund his dream wedding. I folded the bills neatly, very neatly. Anger would have been easier. Yelling, calling, begging him to remember who I was. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I smiled. Because at that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized Kevin didn't see me as a father anymore. He saw me as a resource. And resources, once cut off, have consequences. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to plead. I wasn't going to explain myself to a son who had already decided my worth. I stood up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat back down at the table. I looked at the bill one last time, then at my laptop resting quietly on the counter. Kevin thought this was the end of the story. For me, it was just the beginning. I wasn't born into money. Nothing in my life was handed to me. Every dollar that ever touched my hands had fingerprints on it from long hours, tired eyes, and choices that favored responsibility over comfort. I spent 36 years as a civil engineer in Kentucky, not the glamorous kind you see on magazine covers. I worked municipal contracts, road expansions, flood control projects, the kind of work people only notice when it fails. My days started before sunrise and ended after dark. 12-hour shifts were normal. Weekends were optional, only if nothing broke. When Elena and I married, we lived in a modest 2-bedroom house with creaky floors and a leaky kitchen sink I fixed myself every winter. We talked about upgrading someday, traveling, maybe buying a cabin near the lake. Those plans quietly disappeared when real life showed up. Kevin was born 2 years later. From the moment I held him, I understood something deeply American and deeply permanent. My life was no longer just mine. I took on extra projects, declined vacations, drove the same pickup truck for 15 years. When coworkers bought new cars, I bought college savings bonds. When friends booked cruises, I stayed home, balancing budgets and fixing drywall. Elena used to tease me, saying I treated our savings account like a sacred object. She wasn't wrong. Everything changed in 2013 when Elena got sick. Cancer doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It takes over schedules, conversations, and finances with brutal efficiency. Insurance covered some of it, not all. Experimental treatments weren't included. Neither were the long nights in private care facilities when complications hit. I took out a second mortgage, then a third. I cashed out a retirement account early and paid the penalty without complaint. Over 3 years, I spent just over $180,000 on medical expenses that insurance wouldn't touch. I never told Kevin the number. He didn't need that burden. Elena passed in 2015. After the funeral, Kevin stood in my driveway and told me I should have done more. He said if I had been more successful, maybe the doctors could have saved her. I swallowed those words and carried them quietly for years. I raised him alone after that. I cooked, cleaned, learned to do laundry properly, showed up to parent-teacher meetings in work boots, paid for tutoring when he struggled in calculus, paid for SAT prep classes, paid for college application fees without ever asking where he applied. Kevin went to a private university. Tuition alone ran $42,000 a year. 4 years, $168,000. Books, housing, food plans added another $22,000. I paid all of it. Not loans, not co-signing. Checks written from accounts built one overtime shift at a time. When he graduated, I helped him move into his first apartment. I covered the security deposit, bought used furniture, a bed, a desk, a couch with a small tear on the armrest that he complained about, even though it cost me $1,200 I didn't really have. I never asked for repayment. When his friends took pictures in luxury apartments, Kevin sent me links, half joking, half resentful. When he got promoted in tech, he started talking differently, faster, sharper, less patient. He called my life safe. He said I never pushed myself hard enough. Still, I kept showing up. Every Christmas I gave him something practical: laptop upgrades, emergency cash, help with credit cards. He never asked how I managed it on a pension and consulting work. He assumed I always would. After Elena died, I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped eating out. I stopped planning for myself entirely. My savings existed for one reason: my son's future. And now that same son had banned me from his wedding. Standing in my kitchen that afternoon, looking at the $80,000 bill, I did the math without effort. That invoice alone represented nearly 2 years of careful saving, 2 years of saying no to myself, 2 years of quiet discipline. And it wasn't even the total. It was just the latest demand. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was the assumption, the entitlement, the belief that my sacrifices were invisible, automatic, owed. Kevin didn't see the years. He saw the outcome. He didn't see the nights I stayed up reworking budgets so he could attend a better school. He didn't see the panic I felt signing loan documents after Elena's diagnosis. He didn't see the dignity it took to keep going without complaint. He just saw a father who didn't fit his image anymore. As I sat there, bills neatly stacked, I understood something I should have learned earlier. Kindness without boundaries teaches people the wrong lesson. It teaches them that loyalty has no cost, that sacrifice is endless, that respect is optional. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me calm. And calm, I would soon learn, was far more dangerous. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as ambition, confidence, and success. After Kevin started dating Victoria, the changes were subtle enough that I questioned myself for noticing them. Phone calls became shorter, replies slower. Invitations turned into obligations, and then disappeared altogether. At first, I blamed myself. He was building a career. He was busy. That was normal. That's what I told myself every time he canceled dinner or forgot to call back. But then the comments started. "Dad, you still driving that old car? Don't you ever think about upgrading your lifestyle? You should really move. This neighborhood doesn't reflect who we are." Who we are. That phrase stayed with me. Victoria was always polite on the surface. Smiles that never reached her eyes, compliments that felt like evaluations. She talked endlessly about optics, branding, presentation, about how people perceived you before they ever listened to you. The first time I met her friends, I noticed how Kevin watched their reactions to me. He laughed louder when they did, shifted uncomfortably when I spoke about work instead of investments. When I mentioned my pension, one of them raised an eyebrow. Kevin didn't defend me. He looked away. I started feeling like a guest in my own son's life. Birthdays passed with quick texts instead of visits. Holidays turned into excuses. One Christmas, I showed up with homemade food, the same recipes Elena used to make. Victoria glanced at the containers and said they were trying something cleaner this year. Kevin didn't even look embarrassed. He just shrugged. When I brought it up later, gently, he accused me of guilt-tripping him, said I was stuck in the past, said I needed to adapt. Adapt to what? Being erased? The distance grew measurable. Conversations that used to last an hour barely made it past 5 minutes. When I asked how he was doing financially, he bristled, told me not to worry about it, told me I wouldn't understand modern success. But when bills came up, he understood me just fine. There was always a quiet expectation that I would help, a subtle pause after mentioning rent increases, a casual reference to credit card balances, a silence that assumed I would fill it, and I always did. I noticed something else, too. Kevin stopped asking how I was. He never asked about my health, never asked how retirement felt, never asked if I was lonely after Elena. Our conversations became one-directional, and I was no longer the destination. I was the support beam. The final warning sign came 6 months before the wedding. I asked him directly if I was invited. He laughed, actually laughed, said of course I was, then added that they were keeping it very curated. That word again, curated, as if a wedding was a gallery and I was a questionable piece. After that, I stopped reaching out first. I wanted to see if he would notice. He didn't. Weeks passed, then months. I learned about the engagement through social media, saw photos of a ring I didn't help choose, watched strangers congratulate him on a future I was no longer part of. I should have confronted him then. I should have asked hard questions. But hope is stubborn, especially for parents. You keep believing your child will remember who you are when it matters. I told myself the wedding would reset everything. It didn't. Instead, it exposed the truth I had been avoiding. Kevin didn't see my silence as restraint. He saw it as permission, my patience as weakness, my generosity as obligation. And by the time the envelope arrived with the 80,000 bill, the decay was complete. What shocked me wasn't the demand. It was how natural it felt to him. That's when I finally understood something painful and clarifying. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the result of years of unchecked entitlement, reinforced by my refusal to draw a line. I wasn't being pushed out. I was being replaced by my money. And once I accepted that truth, I stopped grieving. I started thinking. The moment everything broke wasn't loud. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. It arrived quietly, disguised as efficiency. 3 weeks after the engagement announcement, Kevin finally called. His voice was upbeat, rushed, like he was checking off a task. "Dad, just so you know," he said, "the wedding will be pretty tight. Victoria's parents are inviting a lot of people, some executives, investors. It's not really your scene." I waited. "So," he continued, "it's better if you don't come. No hard feelings. We just want the day to feel right." I didn't respond immediately. I thought I had misheard him. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that I'm not invited to my own son's wedding?" He sighed, irritated now. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll understand when you think about it." That was it. No apology, no hesitation, just a decision made without me. But what came next was worse. 2 days later, the envelope arrived. The bill. $80,000, broken down with professional precision, as if it were a corporate expense report. Venue rental, premium catering, decor upgrades, a honeymoon in Hawaii with private transfers and luxury upgrades. At the bottom, that note, that single sentence that erased decades of sacrifice. "Be grateful. I'm letting you contribute." That was the moment my son stopped being careless and became cruel. I sat with that paper for a long time, long enough to feel every layer of hurt peel away and leave something harder underneath. This wasn't about money. This was about control, about status, about rewriting the past so that my role fit neatly into Kevin's new narrative. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a sponsor. I replayed our last argument in my head, the one where he blamed me for his mother's death, the one where he said my life was small, where he said I lacked ambition. And now he wanted my money to finance a version of success that excluded me entirely. I realized something then that stopped the pain instantly. Kevin didn't expect me to say no. He had never imagined it. In his mind, I was permanent, reliable, silent, a background utility that could be tapped without consequence. My feelings didn't factor into his planning. Only my bank balance did. That assumption was the betrayal, not the bant, not the bill, the certainty that I would comply. I folded the paper and placed it carefully back into the envelope. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. Something inside me had gone quiet, the way an engine does just before it switches modes. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I didn't argue. Instead, I opened my laptop. I looked up the wedding planner listed on the invoice, read every vendor contract carefully, reviewed payment schedules, cancellation clauses, deadlines. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting as a father. I was acting as a man protecting what was left of his dignity. By the end of that night, I knew exactly how much power I still had, and Kevin had no idea what he had just triggered. There's a moment in every man's life when emotion stops being useful. For me, that moment came the morning after I read the bill. I woke up before sunrise, made coffee, and sat in the quiet of my kitchen with my laptop open. No anger, no shaking hands, just focus. The kind that comes when you finally accept the truth instead of fighting it. Kevin had already made his choice. Now it was my turn. The first name I called was the wedding planner listed on the invoice, Mark Brennan. His website was polished, full of smiling couples and words like seamless, luxury, and stress-free. I dialed his office number at exactly 9:02 a.m. "Mark Brennan Events," he answered, cheerful and confident. "My name is Stephen," I said calmly. "I'm the father of the groom, the one paying for the wedding." There was a pause, a subtle shift in tone. "Oh, yes, Mr. Torres. Kevin mentioned you might call. We're just finalizing." "I won't be sending any money today," I interrupted. Silence. Then confusion. Then concern. "I'm not withdrawing support," I continued. "I'm pausing it until I have a conversation with my son." Mark cleared his throat. "Sir, the contracts. I've read them," I said. "Every page, every clause. The balance isn't due yet, and until it's paid, nothing proceeds." Another pause. This one longer. "Understood," he said carefully. "I'll notify the vendors." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. For the first time since Elena died, I felt something unfamiliar. Control. That afternoon, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Alex, Kevin's childhood friend. A boy who used to eat dinner at our table when his own home was falling apart. He'd grown up, become a private investigator. Quiet, observant. The kind of man who noticed things others ignored. When he answered my call, his voice softened immediately. "Mr. Torres," he said, "I'm glad you called." We met at a small cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, just coffee and worn wooden tables. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything. The ban, the bill, the entitlement. When I finished, he didn't look surprised. "He's always been like that," Alex said quietly. "It just took success to bring it out." He told me things I hadn't known. How Kevin had taken credit for other people's work. How he burned bridges the moment someone stopped being useful. How Victoria encouraged it, reinforced it, turned ambition into arrogance. I didn't feel betrayed by the information. I felt confirmed. Alex helped me understand my options. What could be documented? What could be recorded legally? How reputation collapses faster than finances when people start paying attention. "Don't confront him emotionally," Alex said. "Let the system do the work. Let him reveal himself." That night, I set boundaries for the first time in my life. I stopped answering Kevin's calls. I stopped replying to texts. I let the silence speak. Within 48 hours, panic replaced entitlement. Voicemails started coming in. First irritated, then confused, then desperate. "Dad, what's going on? Why isn't the planner responding?" "You're overreacting. I listened to every message without responding. Alex sent me updates. Vendors hesitating. Deposits delayed. Whispers starting." I wasn't enjoying it. I was watching it. Watching my son experience something he'd never faced before. Consequences. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional, loud, temporary. This was education, and the lesson had only just begun. Silence is uncomfortable for people who are used to control. I learned that quickly. The first 2 days after I stopped responding, Kevin was irritated. His messages were short, clipped, confident. He assumed I was bluffing, that I would fold once the pressure built. By the third day, the tone changed. "Dad, the planner says payments are delayed. Can you just confirm you're sending the money? Please call me." I didn't. Instead, I watched. Alex kept me updated. Vendors were starting to hesitate. The florist requested confirmation before ordering imported arrangements. The caterer paused staffing schedules. The venue flagged the date as pending. Nothing dramatic, just small, quiet delays, like cracks forming under polished marble. Kevin had no idea how fragile his dream really was. I spent those days doing something I should have done years earlier. I reviewed my finances, not as a father, but as a man. I listed everything I had given, every check, every transfer, every emergency payment disguised as help. The total was staggering when written in black ink, and still it wasn't enough for him. Alex helped me set up documentation, call logs, voicemails, screenshots of texts, every entitled word preserved. Not to use against Kevin publicly, but to remind myself that this wasn't cruelty. This was self-defense. Meanwhile, Kevin spiraled. His calls increased. Morning, afternoon, late night. His confidence cracked just enough to reveal panic underneath. Victoria started calling too. Her messages were colder, strategic. "Stephen, this is unnecessary. You're damaging Kevin's future. This will reflect badly on you." That one made me laugh. For years I had worried about how I reflected on Kevin. Now she was worried about how he reflected on me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stayed quiet. Every unanswered call taught them something they'd never learned before. That access to me was not guaranteed. That money didn't flow automatically. That respect wasn't optional. By the end of the week, the pressure behind the scenes was building fast. Alex sent photos, trucks idling outside warehouses, staff waiting for instructions that never came, a coordinator arguing on the phone in a parking lot. Kevin still thought he could fix it by force. His last voicemail before the collapse was angry. "You're doing this on purpose," he said. "You're trying to embarrass us." He was right, but not for the reason he thought. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I was letting him experience what it felt like to stand unsupported, exposed by his own behavior. The trap wasn't dramatic. There were no ultimatums, no threats, just time. And time, when paired with entitlement, is merciless. Arrogance has a very specific sound. It's loud when things are going well, and vicious when control starts slipping. Kevin's arrogance didn't disappear when the money stopped moving. It intensified. He doubled down on the version of himself he wanted the world to believe in. The successful son, the rising executive, the man who couldn't possibly be wrong. Alex told me Kevin had been calling vendors personally, name-dropping, promising transfers any day now. He spoke like someone used to being obeyed, like someone who believed authority came from confidence alone. It didn't. I heard it in Kevin's voicemails. "You're overreacting. You're ruining your relationship with me. You'll regret this." Those words weren't fear. Not yet. They were entitlement fighting for air. Victoria was worse. She called from unfamiliar numbers, left messages that sounded rehearsed, calculated. "Stephen, this silence makes you look unstable. People are starting to ask questions. You don't want to be remembered like this." remembered like this, as if my legacy depended on financing a party I wasn't welcome at. Alex shared stories from the periphery. Kevin snapping at a florist for wasting his time. Victoria lecturing a venue coordinator about professionalism while refusing to authorize payment. Staff exchanging looks. The kind of looks people share when they realize someone powerful isn't actually powerful at all. Kevin still believed he would win. He told mutual acquaintances that I was being emotional, that I was struggling with aging, that I didn't understand modern weddings or modern success. He framed himself as patient, reasonable, the adult in the room. He said I would come around. That was the hubris. He couldn't imagine a world where I didn't. The wedding date crept closer, and instead of adjusting plans, Kevin escalated appearances. He posted carefully curated photos, smiling engagement shots, luxury teasers, countdown captions. Everything looked perfect online. Offline, it was rotting. The venue flagged the date as unpaid. The caterer reduced staffing. The florist halted imports. The photographer stopped responding entirely. Still, Kevin believed his charm would override reality. The night before the wedding, he left me a voicemail that finally revealed the truth beneath the confidence. "You're jealous," he said. "You always have been. You couldn't build what I'm building, so you're trying to destroy it." That sentence didn't hurt. It clarified. Kevin didn't see me as a father who had sacrificed. He saw me as competition, a reminder of a life built slowly instead of loudly. He needed to beat me, and that's why he was about to lose. Because the moment someone believes they're untouchable is the moment gravity starts working again. The collapse didn't begin with an explosion. It began with rain. I woke up on the morning of the wedding to the sound of it tapping steadily against my kitchen window. Soft at first, persistent. The kind of rain that soaks through expensive fabric and ruins carefully planned schedules. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down, calm as ever. My phone was already vibrating. Kevin had called 11 times before 7 a.m. Victoria had left 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to them yet. I didn't need to. I already knew what they said. Alex texted me at 7:12 a.m. They're panicking. Vendors are pulling out. The venue is demanding payment before doors open. I closed my eyes for a moment and took a slow sip. This was the part people misunderstand about consequences. They think it's about punishment, about cruelty. It isn't. It's about inevitability. By 9 a.m., the situation was unraveling publicly. Alex sent photos from outside the venue, trucks idling in the parking lot, engines running, staff standing around with folded arms and nowhere to go. A florist loading boxes back into a van. A catering supervisor arguing on the phone, pacing in the rain. The venue doors remained closed. Kevin still believed he could force a solution. He left me a voicemail, his voice no longer arrogant, tight, controlled, but shaking underneath. "Dad, this isn't funny anymore. The estate won't let guests in. They're asking for confirmation. Just send the money. Well, talk after." Well, talk after. That line said everything. I finally listened to Victoria's messages. Her voice was clipped, sharp with panic. "This is humiliating. People are already asking questions. If this gets out, it'll follow us. Think about Kevin's career." I did think about it. I thought about how Kevin had told people I was unstable, outdated, a liability. I thought about how easily he erased me. By noon, guests began arriving. Alex captured it all. People in formal clothes standing under umbrellas, confused glances, quiet whispers, phones coming out, social media filling the silence. Didn't the father pay? I heard there's a dispute. This is awkward. Rain turned the gravel drive into mud. Shoes sank. Dresses darkened at the hem. The image Kevin had worked so hard to build was dissolving in real time. At 10:40 p.m., my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. I opened the door to find Kevin and Victoria standing on my porch, soaked and shaking. Kevin's hair was plastered to his forehead. Victoria's makeup had run in thin streaks down her face. The designer coat she wore hung heavy with rain. "Dad," Kevin said, breathless, "please, we need to talk." I stepped aside and let them in. They stood in my hallway like strangers. No confidence, no entitlement, just desperation. "The wedding is falling apart," Kevin said. "Vendors are leaving. Guests are laughing. This is turning into a disaster." Victoria grabbed his arm. "Stephen, wire the money. We can still save it. Please." I looked at them carefully. This was the first time they had come to me without demands. It was also too late. "You banned me from the wedding," I said calmly. "You sent me a bill. You told me to be grateful." Kevin swallowed. "That was a mistake." "No," I replied. "That was honesty." Victoria opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Kevin stepped forward, his voice cracking. "I regret it. All of it. Just fix this." I shook my head. This is the fix. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a countdown. Kevin sank into a chair. Victoria stared at the floor. For the first time in his life, my son understood something money had always protected him from. Failure doesn't negotiate. The silence after they left my house was heavier than the rain. I stood by the front window and watched Kevin and Victoria walk back down the driveway. They didn't argue this time. They didn't even speak. Kevin's shoulders were slumped, his posture unfamiliar to me. Victoria held her coat tight around herself, no longer performing, no longer superior. They looked small. My phone buzzed again as their car disappeared down the street. Alex. "Guests are leaving," he wrote. "Some are taking photos. Others are openly asking what happened. The venue staff is packing up." I sat down slowly, the weight of the moment settling in. Not triumph, not joy. Something quieter. Finality. Alex sent more updates throughout the afternoon. The string quartet never arrived. Catering trucks left without unloading. The estate manager closed the gates early. The ceremony was officially canceled by 2:30 p.m. Social media filled the gap that silence left behind. What a mess. Heard the groom's dad pulled funding. Imagine treating your father like that. Kevin had spent years crafting a flawless image. It unraveled in a single afternoon. By evening, the calls stopped. No more threats. No more accusations. Just absence. 2 days later, Kevin finally sent a text. "I didn't realize how much I took you for granted." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "You didn't take me for granted. You erased me. That's different." There was no response. Alex confirmed what I already suspected. Kevin's reputation took a hit. Vendors shared stories quietly. Invitations to social events dried up. People noticed patterns when the money vanished. Entitlement has a way of exposing itself once the spotlight shifts. A week later, Kevin came alone. He didn't knock loudly this time, just stood at the door, hands in his pockets, eyes tired. "I messed up," he said when I let him in. "I thought success meant never looking back." I nodded. "And now?" "And now I don't know who I am without it." That was the collapse, not the canceled wedding, not the public embarrassment, the realization that the life he built was hollow without the people he crushed along the way. I didn't comfort him. I didn't scold him either. I won't fund your mistakes, I said, but I won't stop you from fixing them. He left quietly. I watched him go without regret. Some lessons cost more than money, and some debts can't be paid back at all. Peace doesn't arrive loudly. It comes quietly, after the chaos has burned itself out. In the weeks after the wedding collapsed, my life slowed down in a way it hadn't for years. The phone stopped ringing. No emergencies. No requests. No guilt disguised as obligation. Just mornings with coffee, afternoons with books, evenings that belonged to me. For the first time since Elena died, I felt unburdened. Kevin kept his distance. When we spoke, it was brief and careful. He no longer assumed access to my time or my money. He asked instead of demanded, listened instead of corrected. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar: humility. I didn't celebrate his fall. I didn't need to. The lesson had already done its work. He learned what every adult eventually must, that success built on entitlement collapses the moment support is withdrawn. As for me, I reclaimed parts of myself I had abandoned. I traveled. Nothing extravagant, just quiet places. Elena and I once talked about. I reconnected with old friends. I invested my savings into my own future instead of someone else's illusion. I stopped apologizing for the life I built slowly and honestly. People in the community treated me differently too, not with pity, but with respect. They saw what Kevin hadn't, that dignity doesn't come from appearances. It comes from consistency. Kevin tried to rebuild, slowly, without shortcuts, without my safety net. That was the hardest part for him, but also the most necessary. We're not close the way we once were. Maybe we never will be again. Some fractures don't heal completely, but we speak honestly now, and that's more than we had before. I don't regret what I did. I regret how long it took me to do it. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this: kindness without boundaries is weakness. Love without accountability teaches entitlement, and family loyalty only matters when it runs both ways. I didn't destroy my son's wedding. I saved myself, and that, in the end, was worth everything. If this story resonated with you, ask yourself one question. Who in your life mistakes your kindness for obligation? If you've ever been treated like a wallet instead of a person, you're not alone. Share your story. Speak your truth. Sometimes the strongest thing a parent can do is finally say no.